Welcome to Novara Live. I'm Michael Walker. Interesting show for you tonight because we don't really know what's going to happen this evening. Lots and lots of rumours about far-right protests or riots around the country. No one's really sure what's going to come to pass. We will be talking you through everything that's happened over the past 24 hours, what might be happening in the next 24 hours, and to talk you through it all, I'm delighted to be joined by Joshua Virasami, author, activist. Joshua, your latest book, I think it's out soon, is called A World Without Racism, and presumably will be somewhat relevant to the stories we're going to talk about tonight. What's the idea of the book?
The book, well, first, thanks for having me on the show, Michael. The book is an attempt to kind of glean all of the lessons that we've got from anti-racist struggle over the past few decades from different organizations around the country, people who are working on the front lines of like the immigration system, there's feminist movements, and people working on housing, around policing, people who really take seriously how we incorporate anti-racism into our struggles in working class communities. So trying to glean those lessons and think really importantly about, now is a time where we need to ally these kinds of forces to become a powerful political voice in the country and actually win significant material changes to the lives of working class communities, in particular racialized working class communities. So it's trying to, it's a bit of a stock take, it's a bit of a soul-searching moment for anti-racism. Obviously, there's been an extremely high point of anti-racist struggle right now with what's been going on with BLM, with the pro-Palestine protests. So it's an opportunity, it's just one part of the conversation to really be like, what are we going to do now? How are we going to move forward?
We'll also be talking tonight about Kamala Harris picking her vice presidential nominee. This evening could see dozens of instances of far-right groups causing further violence across the UK. Thousands of police are on standby across the country to deal with potential rioting, saying they're aware of 100, quote, potential events and 30 counter demonstrations. However, it's very unclear what exactly is going to happen. So a widely reported list of 39 potential targets for arson shared on a far-right Telegram channel, while extremely worrying, is not necessarily the same thing as 39 organised far-right riots. Anti-fascist research group Red Flare has warned on Twitter about sharing potentially false information, saying this: over the past week, we have seen social media users spreading rumours and speculation about far-right protests, sharing unattributed screenshots of call-outs or even just forwarded messages without any corroborating evidence that the purported threat amounts to anything. It is important to try and avoid propagating rumours, while it often feels vital to share information, especially in the wake of riots when there are counter-mobilizations happening. Spreading unevidenced rumours can misidentify the nature of the fascist threat in particular areas. I think people are in a really difficult situation knowing what to share. Obviously, if you've got information that you think there's going to be a far-right riot, you want to give people pre-warning. At the same time, it's very difficult to know what warning should be taken seriously, how much panic is being spread. Really difficult for everyone, including people reporting on it. Obviously, you don't need to feel sorry for the people reporting on it, but that's why there's so much uncertainty when it comes to this story at the moment. For his part, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, he has, of course, been a key far-right influencer and stoking tensions from his 5-star hotel in Crete. Today, he claimed this on Twitter. So he said this: most of these far-right protests that you are reading are planned are fake. And he says it's being done to get Muslims out on the street and cause carnage. The government say they are against it, but I actually believe they are encouraging it. They stand down the police and allow violence to hit the streets. Then in response, they will bring in draconian laws and powers to limit our speech. The whole time they orchestrate this total shit show, they blame me. They will want control of X and want me silenced. Now, that is the sound of someone who is sitting by a swimming pool, having taken too much cocaine. It doesn't really make any sense to me. But the idea of sort of saying these protests are fake, maybe that does have something to it. This is someone who does seem to be sort of in the know when it comes to far-right rioting. So while I think his sort of explanation of what's going on is completely out there, I'm not sure we are going to see loads of far-right riots across the country tonight. Who'll know? Maybe by the time you're watching this, they'll have all taken off, right? I really hope that's not the case. As I say, interesting, a far-right figurehead is talking down the scale of tonight's disorder. Nonetheless, of course, minority ethnic communities are terrified. Channel 4 News spoke to the child of an immigration lawyer who had decided to evacuate his family after his name was included on a list of targets for arson attacks.
You must be missing all your things, your bedroom and all your toys and...
I don't message my friends or anything about it because I don't want any more trouble or anything.
And how do you feel about the people who have made you leave your house?
It's like racism, like I don't like it. I don't understand why someone would want to be racist.
It's just so appalling. So a kid of a lawyer, you know, his place of work or home has been put out on these Telegram channels. And you have to say, you know, obviously people say, oh, the police will keep everyone safe. We're going to get onto this in a moment, or the extent that people will. But if you were a young kid and you have seen those videos on Twitter of people throwing bricks through people's living room windows or setting fire to hotels, you're not going to feel confident that you will be kept safe, right? For that reason, mosques and shops have also been boarded up in towns across the country. Footage taken in Walthamstow today shows shops being boarded up and police vans around. And that's after the far right were sort of rumours were circulated that they were planning to have a presence. As I say, by the time some of you are watching this show on YouTube later this evening, it should be clear by then just how much unrest fascist groups have or have not caused tonight. What we do know is that anti-racist demonstrations are planned in a number of locations. Organisers are hoping they will be a show of strength against the fascism and Islamophobia of the far right. And while it's unclear that far-right activity could happen this evening, there's a risk of more far-right disorder this weekend. On Friday and Saturday, 8 far-right demonstrations are planned in towns and cities, including Crawley, Liverpool, Glasgow, Newcastle and Hull. Do the police, though, have the capacity to keep Britain's ethnic minority communities safe from this threat, wherever it arises? The Met Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has tried to reassure the country that he thinks so.
Protecting communities is at the core of policing. That's why, as police chiefs, we've been meeting regularly over the last few days, and we've decided to marshal thousands of police officers across the country. We've changed our tactics in the last couple of days. So besides marshalling more officers, we're brigading some of them at key strategic locations across the country to give us more agility to respond to wherever the protests are most intense, so that we can respond with agility and show overwhelming force so that the criminals and thugs on the streets don't succeed.
We're hearing about specifically immigration centres or immigration lawyers being targeted. How concerned are you for people in that space tonight?
So we've seen that list circulated. Obviously, that's at the centre of our planning for tonight. Also keeping an open mind on other possibilities and other intelligence that's coming into our system. That's why we have thousands of officers on tonight. We will protect those people. It is completely unacceptable, regardless of your political views, to intimidate any sector of lawful activity, and we will not let the immigration asylum system be intimidated.
It's interesting the way he's talking there about sort of police vans being put in different nodes and sort of watching the riots, what looked like pogroms in many instances sort of taking place across the country, and seeing, you know, it doesn't seem like the police are shutting it down quick enough. I imagine, you know, if you're trying to be fair to them, one of the challenges is they're all spread out, right? They don't know where the most dangerous riot is going to generate. And so say you've got a bunch of people in Rotherham about to set a hotel on fire. Well, presumably they've got police in sort of all different towns because they've got no idea where it's going to kick off. And then the issue is how quickly they can get there. As far as I understand, sort of policing in general, if you don't think there's a risk to life and it's a situation like this, you kind of step back, try and contain it, and then arrest people afterwards after just looking through all the CCTV. But obviously, if there's a threat of burning down a hotel full of people, then you really need to get there really, really quickly. And I suppose that's what they're trying to strategize at the moment. In terms of people who have been caught and charged, some of them are already being put through the justice system. Sky News had these details today.
Some breaking developments now on sentences being passed down at Liverpool Crown Court. 3 sentences passed down in the last few minutes. The final, Liam James Riley, 40, of Kirkdale, pleaded guilty to violent disorder in Liverpool city centre, has been jailed for 22 months. That's following the events of the past few days. Previously, a sentence of 30 months to Declan Gearan of Liverpool pleaded guilty to violent disorder and arson on a police vehicle in Liverpool city centre. Meanwhile, Derek Drummond, 58, of Liverpool, pleaded guilty to violent disorder and assaulting an emergency worker in Southport. He was sentenced to 3 years in jail. So 3 years, 30 months and 20 months passed down in the last few moments.
Keir Starmer shared that clip on Twitter. He said, "This is the swift action we're taking. If you provoke violent disorder on our streets or online, you will face the full force of the law." And we can take a look at a picture of the three men who've been sentenced. So here on the left, that's a 29-year-old Declan Gearan. He was jailed for 30 months. And that was after admitting to attempting to set fire to a police van during a far-right rally in Liverpool city centre. In the centre, that's Derek Drummond. He got 3 years for punching a police officer in the face at the Southport riot. And then on the right is 41-year-old Liam James Riley, who was jailed for 20 months after admitting to violent disorder in Liverpool city centre. Joshua, I want your thoughts on this. I suppose the message from Keir Starmer and from the courts is to say, we are dealing with these people quickly and they're getting, I mean, to be fair, this doesn't actually seem that tough a sentence to me. 3 years for punching a cop at a far-right riot, but I want your opinion on this.
Firstly, I want to sit with part of what you just said. Speaking to a child who has to leave their home for fear of a racist pogrom, like what we're seeing is unprecedented, right? Like maybe the far right mobilized today. I mean, they already have in some places, and maybe they mobilized everywhere they've said. But irrespective of that, thousands, if not tens of thousands of people are not going to their place of worship, are not leaving their homes. Their family are telling them to stay put for fear of a racist pogrom. Like what we're living through is unprecedented levels of racial violence in this country, and we really need to, take a beat and sit with that. In terms of the policing response, yeah, you're right. Like it's funny, they've got this two-tier mantra going on the far right. This myth. Yeah, people got years in prison for stealing bottles of water or bags of rice in the riots previously. So there really is a disproportionality in the sentencing, but we can't speak about it yet. I wasn't following the news in that way at the time in 2011, but I imagine they couldn't even get like 3 stories to come out like that, because people were being sentenced, in on the evening, sentenced in the morning, in prison the following evening. Like it was thousands of people were in prison. They couldn't do what they're doing now, I imagine. So like what we're seeing is a very different scale of policing. And in terms of are the police responding adequately in communities? I think it is important to be able to walk and chew gum here, right? Like I was reading a quote from a child in, I think it was Tamworth in the hotel, who said, "Until the day I die, I won't forget what the police did for me on that day." In many ways, the thin blue line was an important thin blue line in a lot of communities. And when leaders in the community were giving cake and tea, it's because they were genuinely feeling that they're being protected, right? So we can acknowledge that it was really important to have the police in certain places. But we also need to acknowledge that a lot of counterparties, a lot of anti-racists have been saying that they weren't really adequate. A lot of the videos we've seen where people were setting alight to the hotels, or those in Tamworth, or whether it was elsewhere, the police were there. The police were standing, besides what was taking place. And you may be right. We can only speculate about how stretched they were at any given moment. But a lot of anti-racists have been saying they've had to protect their community, right? They've had to stand in front of the hotels. They've had to stand up to the far right. And that is a timeless truth. Anti-racists work there, so we have institutional memory of the struggle, and it's always been the reality that we have to defend ourselves. We have to come together and protect our communities. We can only rely on ourselves. And as time goes by, we will see. Well, we've already seen that anti-racists have been depicted as thugs themselves, or as extremists themselves. But we'll see how the cookie crumbles in terms of how the police responses to the counter-protesters. But we really need to be crystal clear that it is the community that will be able to defend ourselves. And that is the reality already.
Yeah, I mean, it is really difficult, I think, for the cops to say, don't go out and protest, we've got this covered, when everyone has seen that picture of the hotel getting burnt down. Well, it didn't get burnt down, but them sort of smashing the windows, setting it on fire and running through, and we know sort of abusing asylum seekers who were staying in that hotel. Now, I don't know why they weren't able to stop that. As I say, sort of the sympathetic position is to say they didn't think they had enough cops to sort of intervene without themselves getting harmed. I mean, I think that scene where you did see a line of cops and then people breaking into a hotel, that does seem like bad policing, because I think their model of policing up to now, this is sort of what I was sort of saying about the Hare Hills riot, when people were saying, why are they not stopping these protesters? You can see some cops there, you can see they're setting fire to a car, why aren't they all coming in? And the explanation there is that they said, and the cops said at the time, if anyone was at risk of life, we would have gone in. And they say, if no one's at risk of life, what we prefer to do, unless there's loads and loads of us, is just stand back, make sure it doesn't spread, and take information, and then we arrest people afterwards. And that does seem appropriate in that situation. It seems like they took the same model to Tamworth and Rotherham, whereas in Tamworth and Rotherham, there actually was a threat to life, which means it does seem like they should take a few more risks and actually stand in front of the windows when people are smashing them. But I'm not an expert, but I do agree with you, Joshua, that, you know, the moment people have seen videos like that, you can't tell people, oh, we've got this covered, stay at home. Obviously, people are going to feel rightly that they need to go out and sort of protect their own communities. Now, how they do that, that's a different question, but sort of going out and turning up to these protests, I think, is a good thing to do. And as I say, we're not confident about whether or not far-right protests or riots will emerge this evening. What we do know is that there's going to be lots and lots of anti-racist ones. So I'm sure we'll be showing you lots of images of those on tomorrow's show. Those sentences we just described there for those three men, they're for people who've been caught, processed, and then pled guilty. That's why we know about this so quickly. We know there are another 400 people who've been arrested at least. And one police officer in Liverpool has warned rioters who haven't yet been caught that the law will catch up with them eventually.
What I would say to those people who think they've got away with being involved in the disorder on Tuesday or on Saturday, you absolutely haven't got away with it. We are coming for you. We've got hours of social media footage. We've got hours of CCTV footage. I've got officers working round the clock to identify who you are, where you live, where you work. We are coming for you. We'll be coming for you for the next few days. We'll be coming for you for the next few months. So you might get to next week. You might be sitting with a cup of tea thinking, phew, I've got away with it. Please let me reassure you, you haven't got away with it. We are coming for you. You will feel the full force of the law.
So you saw there the image of the library in Liverpool that was burnt down. These are obviously protesters who are pretending they're out to protect Britain's kids. And then to do that, they're burning down libraries, public libraries. And the Director of Public Prosecutions has also warned that people sharing racist material on social media might soon get a knock on the door from police.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth. So it's a really, really serious. People might think they're not doing anything harmful. They are, and the consequences will be visited upon them.
Regardless of when rioters or those who might incite them might get rounded up, the victims of their behaviour have already suffered immensely, and the owner of a car that was torched by rioters in Middlesbrough has been revealed as a care worker who was in the middle of a 12-hour shift looking after elderly people.
Thugs surround a car in Middlesbrough and set it alight. While this was happening to his car on Sunday afternoon, Brendan was in the middle of a 12-hour shift as a carer, looking after elderly people in the town.
So when I came back home, I saw what happened. I just only saw the remnants of it. It was no longer a car, but a scrap. I couldn't even recognize it. I went to the bathroom. I cried because I know how much it took me to be able to save this money and be able to get this. What am I even doing here? That was the question I asked them. What am I even doing here? I'm here taking care of somebody. I'm here taking care of people, making sure they are okay.
Immigration lawyers have for a long time been a rhetorical target of Tory politicians, and in this wave of racist riots, many now fear they could become the target of violence from the far right. The offices of immigration law firms have been shared on far-right Telegram channels, and at least one legal professional has received a death threat. Earlier today, I spoke to Kees Siddiqui, former refugee and now immigration lawyer who received a death threat this Monday.
I received a phone call on Monday afternoon. Somebody called me and they said that I'm what's wrong with this country, that they know where I work and that they'll come to get me and kill me. So the whole phone call was like 10, 15 seconds long. So by the time I could process what was happening, they had already cut the line. So yeah, that's what happened.
The number they called you on, was that your personal phone? Was that your work number? Was this sort of a publicly available phone number that they found?
Yes, it was my work phone that they contacted me on.
What did you do next? Did you tell the police? Did you say I've sort of received this death threat?
Well, I have received death threats before during the Rwanda litigation that I dealt with a couple of years ago. But my first instinct was to put the record straight because earlier that day I had seen many people circulating a list of potential lawyers or immigration firms that the far right were going to be rioting or protesting or going to. And I saw many people saying that it's fake, they're liars, nothing is going to come of it, those kind of things, which upset me greatly. So I wanted to put the record straight. So a few minutes later, I posted about it on X. I said that this is real, and because I had been a victim of it and I had received a death threat. So that's what I did. And then immediately afterwards, I contacted the police, and they're coming on Friday to take a statement from me. So I've been through this process before, and because, as I mentioned, I received death threats before a couple of years ago, but that investigation is still ongoing. So I don't have much trust or a lot of hope in the police that they're going to do anything, if you know what I mean. So because 2 years later, more than 2 years later, nothing has come of the previous investigation into the death threat.
Is your mistrust of the police because you think they haven't dealt with it properly? I mean, I don't really understand how these things sort of work technologically. If you tried hard enough, it would be easy enough to track a call or not. Where did sort of the mistrust come in?
Yes, the mistrust came in because I'm quite active on social media, so I get numerous threats or racial slurs thrown at me, especially on X. So I forwarded all of that to the police, and they said that they will investigate it. But 2 years later, nothing has come of it. And I understand that and appreciate that it could be difficult because most of them have a ghost account or they're calling from private numbers, as this individual did to me on Monday. So it's going to be very difficult or nearly impossible for them to track it down, which worries me because if a threat is made at the office or in person, that's a different story. They could potentially be located, but to do it digitally, it's a different story. And but I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that the perpetrator will be found eventually, and they'll face the full force of the law.
You mentioned sort of on social media, sort of these images of various legal offices being shared as targets, and you think this is associated to that. I mean, are you of the understanding that the firm you work at was sort of part of some of those viral far right messages?
Fortunately for me, the firm that I work for, they're not on the list. But obviously that didn't take away from the fact that I still received a phone call. So I think that a general list of law firms have been circulated, but not all immigration practitioners are safe.
I suppose, of course, just because a message hasn't surfaced publicly doesn't mean there was never a message on one of these message boards. Are you sort of changing the way you sort of behave and move around the world this week? I mean, are you still turning up to work? Are you staying at home? How have you sort of, I suppose, varied your activities if you have done at all?
I mean, I have taken precautions. Like yesterday, on Monday, I had to close the office sooner than I usually do, and yesterday I didn't go to the office at all. But ultimately, I mean, I sat down with myself, and I'm a strong advocate of being proud of who you are, no matter your background, because I'm a former refugee, and I tick all the boxes and everything that they hate. I'm non-white, I'm Muslim, I'm a immigration lawyer who deals with asylum seekers on a daily basis. So all of these things, and I'm a former refugee, so all of these things that they hate, and I think that my voice is important in the current climate, and I want to send a strong message that I'm not going to cower. and because that's ultimately what they want. They want me to be silenced and intimidated into silence. And I don't want that to happen. I want to send a message of, no, your tactics are not working with me. I'm still going to share my story.
It does seem sort of like you've almost got the full house when it comes to sort of the identities that they mobilize against. And I suppose, as you've said, that means you're no stranger to the far right. You already got a death threat. I mean, we don't know who it was from, but one would assume probably from someone on the far right a couple of years ago. This sort of upsurge of far right riots, pogroms even, I mean, it's taken lots of people by surprise. Have you been surprised by what we've seen over the past 7 days or so?
Not at all. I mean, I keep saying this. This is not an overnight thing or a sudden burst of attacks by the far right. This is something that has been brewing for many, many years. Not least by the Home Secretaries, previous Home Secretaries, who have, in essence, portrayed us as these villains, the lefty lawyers that they called us, to make it seem all right to attack us.
That was Kez Siddiqui. I did want to speak to him a little bit longer earlier today, but his laptop died, and we're having some technological hiccups today. Kamala Harris has chosen her nomination for vice president, and she introduced him last night to a rally in Pennsylvania.
And now, welcome the next vice president of the United States, Tim Walz.
Tim Walz is the governor of the Midwestern state of Minnesota. Kamala Harris is, of course, from the very liberal West Coast state of California. So the idea is that Walz should give the Democratic presidential ticket more geographical balance. As for his politics, Walz is seen as being relatively liberal. He instituted free school meals in his state and has been more open to the demands of pro-Palestine protesters than other contenders for the VP nomination, even if he does remain pro-Israel on most of the questions that matter, as is the case for nearly everyone other than the real left when it comes to American politicians. Walz, though, has principally won plaudits for his relaxed, straight-talking speaking style, which was on show last night.
Some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
I mean, that is the message the Democrats want to run on in this presidential election. The other guys, they're overbearing. They want to know what you're doing in your bedroom. They care about your reproductive health. They care what you. It's not up to you. Mind your own goddamn business. I think very good line. Walz is also at the funnier end of American politics. He was the first politician to start calling Donald Trump and J.D. Vance weird, which seems to have struck a nerve among Republicans. So the Democrats, for a number of years, had been calling them a real threat to democracy, sort of hyping up the danger of Donald Trump. He said, actually, they're just weirdos. And that seems to have hit a nerve among Republicans and the public. And last night, Walz made this dig at his vice presidential rival.
Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on. That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
Now, you might have heard him say, see what I did there. You might be thinking, what the hell did he do there? What the hell is he talking about? Well, if you've been on social media in the last couple of weeks, you'll know that one of the charges being thrown against J.D. Vance is that when he was younger, he had sex with a couch. Now, this is fake news. It's based fundamentally on just kind of a spoof tweet that someone did a couple of weeks ago. It was sort of like a spoof paragraph from his Hillbilly Elegy book. But, I suppose the Republicans spread fake news. The Democrats now think two can play at that game, and it fits into this whole, it's believable because he's a weirdo, which is the kind of Waltz line, which Kamala Harris and the entire Democrats seem to have taken on board with gusto. Harris chose Waltz over Josh Shapiro. He's a popular governor of Pennsylvania. He was seen by many as a smart choice, particularly given Pennsylvania is the country's most important battleground state. So that would have been an argument for Shapiro. However, according to the New York Times, Kamala Harris was told by her advisors she could win with either candidate. And so after meeting them both, she went with her gut. They report this. Mr. Shapiro had privately appeared more circumspect about the vice presidency. That's according to multiple people familiar with the selection process, asking about his role and responsibilities. Mr. Shapiro, 51, is widely seen as harboring his own presidential ambitions, which could have complicated any relationship where his chief job would be to serve as a dutiful number two. In contrast, Ms. Harris would later describe Mr. Waltz, who explicitly told her not to pick him if he could not help her win, as joyful and willing to do anything for the team. He's just so open, Ms. Harris marveled privately after her meeting with Mr. Waltz, according to one person with knowledge of her comments. I really like him. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, this is somewhat shallow analysis of American politics, there's this sort of strange moment in American politics where, and I've really noticed this on Twitter, where people from across the political spectrum, like left-wing people who are normally really critical of anyone other than, the AOCs of the Democratic Party, sometimes even critical of those, to the Nancy Pelosi sort of centrists of the Democrats. They're like, let's stop fighting. Let's have a good time. Kamala's better than Biden. We don't like Trump. And everyone just seems to be sort of on this good vibes train of like, we like these two. They're kind of funny. Let's hope they win the presidency. So I'm not sure it's a sort of way of looking at politics that will last, but I suppose, there are two tickets at this presidential election. One is appalling. One is, questionable in terms of the politics, but you might as well celebrate the good vibes as you go on. I don't know. Strange. I'm not American, but it seems like it's going okay for the Democrats. We will keep you posted up until the presidential election, of course. Britain is subject to two-tier policing. That's the allegation currently obsessing Britain's right-wingers. The suggestion is that police come down hard on far-right protesters, but are too soft on left-wingers or people from ethnic minorities. And that's a line that's been pushed on the likes of GB News and the Murdoch-owned Talk TV. They treat white working-class rioters differently to ethnic rioters, yelled Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk TV on Tuesday. Ethnic rioters, a very questionable phrase. A few hours later, Talk TV uploaded a video titled, "Accusations of two-tier policing will continue." Now, I always think that writing in the third person is just this really lazy way of doing journalism, right? It means you can make a claim without having to actually justify it, right? Oh, some people might say there's two-tier policing. I don't have to justify it because I'm just telling you what other people are saying. And it does seem like the two-tier policing claim is hard to back up. For a start, the police haven't seemed overwhelmingly effective at clamping down on the far right, which is why the rioters have been able to terrorize people for over a week. Secondly, it's difficult to make any comparison as to how disorder is being policed when no one on the left has hurled missiles at places of worship or attempted to burn down hotels full of people, right? If the policing looks different at one demonstration and another, maybe it's because one of them is burning down hotels and throwing bricks at mosques. Anyway, the right-wing meme continues, this two-tier policing idea, and it's had some high-profile support, including from Tory leadership candidate Robert Jenrick.
So let's talk about policing, because you yourself have tweeted about two-tier policing. As far as I could see, most recently on the 10th of March, does that phrase, two-tier policing, have any application in the last 8 or 9 days?
Well, I have been very critical of the police in the past, particularly around the attitude of some police forces to the protests that we saw since October the 7th, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout
What about the
Allah
last 8 or 9
Akbar
days?
on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested, or project genocidal chants onto Big Ben and that person not be immediately arrested. That attitude is wrong, and I'll always call out the police for it. I think at the moment, the police are doing their very best. We should thank our brave police officers. We should support their efforts. They need now to be arresting the rioters. I want those individuals who've committed these serious crimes to be sent to jail for the longest possible term. I don't think at this moment politicians should be doing anything to make the lives and jobs of our police officers any more difficult than they already are.
That was so disingenuous, right? He tries to end it by saying, look, he's a candidate for Tory leader, by the way. So he's sort of saying, I'm a prime ministerial person. I'm a serious politician. Obviously, there are riots going on, so we should let the police get on with their job. These rioters need to be dealt with seriously. And in the first half of his answer, saying stuff which is so inflammatory in a way which is going to stoke the far right, and which also puts the police in an incredibly sort of difficult situation, right? The idea that saying Allahu Akbar should get you immediately arrested is so racist, right? It is, Allahu Akbar means God is the greatest, right? This is like saying anyone on a street corner who says hallelujah should be immediately arrested, right? 1 billion people pray every day and say Allahu Akbar, right? The idea that should get you arrested is so racist. And I think Robert Jenrick knows that, right? He knows that police are not going to be able to arrest someone for saying Allahu Akbar, right? That would be against every human rights law we have. And if you're saying the police should do this, I'm a politician, and then sort of rioters or the far right say, well, they're saying this and the police aren't arresting them, what's that an encouragement to do? It's an encouragement to vigilante justice, right? Well, they're saying Allahu Akbar. This senior politician says they should be immediately arrested. They're not being immediately arrested. Let's take this into our own hands. So it's an explicit call for vigilantism. Jenrick has tried to row back on the comment this afternoon. So he said or tweeted, Allahu Akbar is spoken peacefully and spiritually by millions of British Muslims in their daily lives. But the aggressive chanting below is intimidatory and threatening, and it's an offence under Section 4 and 5 of the Public Order Act. Extremists routinely abuse common expressions for their own shameful ends. All violence must end. All violence must be called out. Now let's look at the video he shared with that statement. Now, I have to say, I find groups of men with their face covered sort of going down the street a bit intimidating wherever they're chanting. If they were chanting England, 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 I'd find them a little bit intimidating. But the fact of saying Allahu Akbar does not make what those people are doing illegal, right? The intimidatingness has nothing to do with the chant. It has to do with the fact that there's lots of young men with their face covered, sort of going down the street. So again, a completely ridiculous effort to sort of save what was sort of immediately recognizable. It's not even an Islamophobic dog whistle. That was just outright Islamophobia, which he spouted on Sky News, as I say, in a way which encourages vigilante justice by far-right racists. Someone who wasn't impressed by all of this was former Tory chair Baroness Sayeeda Warsi. She tweeted this after Jenrick's attempt to roll back his comments. So she said, no, Robert, you do not get to go on national broadcasters and say one thing and try and pretend you said something else after. If you genuinely feel your comments on Sky News were inappropriate, offensive, incendiary and anti-Muslim, which they were, then start by apologizing. Then you can go back to pretending you're a responsible candidate for the leadership of our party. Not prepared to let you and other colleagues get away with this gaslighting and playing these games anymore. Too much damage has already been done to our country, and it deserves better than this populist nonsense. Joshua, I'm hoping we got you back with slightly better sound now. What's your response to this two-tier policing row?
It's mythical, right? It's an allegation that's not grounded in the facts at all. And like a lot of the discourse, it's just allowed to have its own life on social media and in the political spheres. I think part of the problem here is that the Labour Party are not prepared to have the conversation. They're not prepared to take to task what's being said. What we're seeing from them is like the law and order mandate, the top cop approach, the policing, the criminalisation, which is welcome. We do want to see justice brought to people who are doing racist programs, but we also want to be able to talk about the politics of the situation, what's happening politically, what's at the root of these racist programs. A lot of people want to have an honest dialogue about immigration, an honest dialogue about the far right and about racism, and an honest dialogue about policing, right? And they're absent from this conversation. And so the conversation is being held by opportunist politicians who, let's be clear, right? Jenrick falls in a long line of conservative politicians who have been out and out Islamophobic. It's not a new thing. That culture of Islamophobia within the Tory party, because it is a culture, it has been identified as an institutional problem within the Tory party, has been part and parcel of this climate of Islamophobia in the country that is at the root of these racist problems, right? But where are the political leaders coming out to express that, to explain that? They're completely absent from the conversation. And so we have to come back to ourselves to be able to lift this up. And, when coming back to ourselves, these guys are saying the BLM protests were, police, there was a soft hand in the policing of these protests. As an activist, as an anti-racist activist, I have been charged with violent disorder for taking part in peaceful anti-racist protests. I have been dragged to the Old Bailey. I have been convicted. So it's a myth. It's a totally mythical thing. Right? I've been arrested multiple times for anti-racist activism, peaceful anti-racist activism, charged and at times convicted. And so have my peers and so many people. I mean, this is coming at a time where climate activists are being sent down collectively for people for decades, to prison for decades, right? So it's a totally mythical situation, and we really do need the political leaders of this country to weigh in and to show some integrity and honesty and allow us to have an honest conversation. And to go back to your previous question you asked me, where I wasn't really able to kind of come back speaking about Brian, I think it was the guy whose car was burned, that is an important flashpoint. We need to be able to talk about the contribution, and I'm not saying, the kind of that the contribution of migrants is why they should be able to stay in the country. But it's important to say that they are the backbone of this economy, right? We need to have an honest conversation about immigration and talk about how it is an illegitimate concern, right? We need to be able to debunk that, but they're not weighing into that. They're just doing top cop procedure, and it's not a surprise because that's his background, that's his CV. He was the top cop, right? So yeah, I think we're in a dangerous point where there's no political leadership in this country, and there's a vacuum, and that vacuum is being taken up by opportunists in the Tory party and the far right, and those people who have massive followings on social media. I mean, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, arguably one of the most powerful men in the world, is tweeting two-tier Keir, right? That's where the political conversation is happening. And Keir Starmer is saying, I don't want to speak about Elon Musk. I want to talk about the police, and I want to talk about how many hours how many years we're going to put people in prison for. That's not what, the communities that are facing this aren't saying, criminalize them. We want to see mass criminalization. We're saying we want to talk about how we got here, right? And they're not going to talk about that. And that's the real issue here, because in 5 years' time, where is that? If we don't talk about these things, where are we going to end up? That's the real question.
Joshua, it's been a pleasure having you on. I think we've got you back next week, and we're going to make sure 100% that we got your sound a little bit better, because your insights are fantastic. The sound quality hasn't been perfect, but it was so interesting to have all of your insights. Thank you everyone for watching this evening. We'll be back from 6 tomorrow. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.